Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Just a couple of other items on the Fort Hood situation to close the loop on our last caller there. It is a true fact that according to military policy, until a soldier is actually convicted of a crime, his pay cannot be docked, it cannot be withheld until he's convicted of a crime, discharged from the military, or locked up somewhere. So that's what makes this a horrendous miscarriage of justice, that it has taken so long for him to come to trial. 4 years. This happened in 2009, November of 2009. Here we are, 3.5, pushing 4 years later before it even goes to trial. And we may wind up hitting that 4th year anniversary before this trial is complete. An interesting story here by the Associated Press, because you know what? One of the things that's interesting to me, there's been so much focus on Hasan that nobody's talking about the victims. You know, we talked about the 14th victim yesterday, that there is a 14th victim, 13 soldiers and an unborn baby. In fact, the woman who was pregnant with the baby, when she was dying, the words that were on her lips is my baby, as she was dying because she had been shot dead by this Nidal Hasan. But the Associated Press, and I commend them for this, does a brief bio of each one of the 13 victims, and I'm just going to trace to it very briefly, but it puts a human face on this tragedy, and what it does to me is it puts an exclamation point over our complaint that there's no way in the world that the families of these people should have had to wait 4 years for justice, especially when this guy has confessed to the crime. He said yesterday, his opening statement, the evidence will show that I am the shooter. He said, I am an imperfect Muslim trying to implement a perfect religion. That's what this whole thing was about. So he's admitted he did it. He admitted that he did it in the name of Allah for the sake of his religion, jumped up on the table, shouted, Allahu Akbar. He's confessed to it. There's no reason this trial even ought to be taking place. There's no reason. This guy should be taken out, lined up against the wall, face a firing squad, and executed for the cold-blooded murder of 13 fellow soldiers, 14, counting the unborn baby. This trial is a charade. And here's the problem with it, ladies and gentlemen. Here is the problem with it and the way the military is handling this. Now, he wanted to plead guilty. He wanted to plead guilty. The military would not let him plead guilty because apparently in a capital punishment case, a death penalty case, you cannot accept a guilty plea. If a guy pleads guilty, the most he can get is life without parole, which I don't know how you feel about that. I think he deserves execution. I think he deserves the death penalty. I think it's ridiculous that you would lighten a penalty for a guy that confesses to the crime. When he admits that he did it, that's when you take him out and execute the proper punishment, which ought to be death, in my mind, in this case, you know, just as God instructed us in Matthew 9, 5, and 6. That's how we express the value of human life, is that you're going to take an innocent human life. We're going to show you how much we value human life by insisting that you forfeit your own life if you have taken a human life without cause. But this AP profile gives a human face to these victims. Here's Michael Grant Cahill. He was 62. He helped treat soldiers returning from tours of duty. He and his wife had been married for 37 years, so she's left behind. Here's Major Labardo Eduardo Caravella, 52. He is the father of 3 children. They're bereft of a father. Here's Staff Sergeant Justin DeCrow, married and the father of a teenage daughter. They have been bereft of a husband and father. Here's Captain John Gaffney, married and father of a son. He's dead. Specialist Frederick Green was married with 2 daughters. They've lost a father and a husband. A Specialist Jason Dean Hunt, been married for 2 months. So he's got a grieving brand new bride. A Specialist Sergeant Amy Kruger, she joined the Army after the 2001 terrorist attacks. Highly motivated, highly competitive. She joined up because she wanted to fight the bad guys. Gets cut down in a cafeteria at an air base or at a military base in the United States. PFC Aaron Thomas Nemelka, he enlisted instead of going on a mission for the Mormon Church, the youngest of 4 children in his family. Here's PFC Michael Pearson, died at just 22, Captain Russell Seeger was married and had a son. Private Francesca Velez, she was the one that was pregnant. She was the one that was screaming, my baby, as she died. Lieutenant Colonel Juanita Warman, military physician with 2 daughters and 6 grandchildren. So they've lost a mother and a grandmother. PFC Kam Jong, just 23, married and the father of 3 young children. They've lost a husband and a father. So those are the victims. Those are the ones whose lives were taken by Major Malik Nadal Hasan. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Dwayne in Memphis, Tennessee. Welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian. How are you doing?
Good, Dwayne. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for taking the call. This may be a question that someone has posed to you, and it's somewhat off topic a little bit, but linked as well. But I had recently spoken with Verizon for some other reasons, and I posed the question to them, why and to what extent was the information that was released to NSA?
Uh-huh.
And they're not allowing them to, as representatives of Verizon, to make any kind of statements at this time. And he basically deferred to the court order.
Uh-huh.
And I was wondering if you had any information as to how a citizen could gain access to that court order and what in it
that would be a question.
Verizon to relinquish that information.
Yeah, that would be a question that an attorney would have to answer, and whether it be protected by national security principles or something like that. Freedom of information request might get Verizon to divulge it. And I know Verizon has admitted that they turned all that information over to the federal government, and they said it was to comply with a court order. So they basically were saying, like, we didn't have any choice. We were ordered to do it by a court. We would have been in violation of a court order, not a law, because I don't think there's any law that compels them to do this that I'm aware of. But they got the court order, didn't want to get in trouble with the judge, so it was just easier to cough up the information. So to answer your question, Dwayne, I mean, Verizon's admitted that they turned I'm a Verizon customer. It used to be AT&T, now I'm Verizon. So Verizon's admitted they turned over all that information to the federal government. But you and the federal government has it. So the federal government knows what's in our metadata. They can go find it in Verizon's record, but we can't. We don't know the information that the federal government has. And I assume that's part of your complaint, Dwayne, that the federal government's got information. They know stuff about us that we're not entitled to see, and it's our information.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I was just curious as to what, was entailed in the court order that flushed the information from Verizon, why they, just caved to it without any kind of a fight whatsoever. But
well, and that I don't have an answer to that question. Maybe they just did not want to get in any kind of trouble. The risk was too high. It was easier to cough up the information and comply than create waves. I know some of the providers fought the government on this. I think they all finally knuckled under. I think Apple was one of the ones. Again, I'm going here from memory. Could be wrong about this, but I think Apple was the one that actually fought the government the longest. They held the government off the longest of anyone, but they eventually, all of them, caved. All right, Dwayne, appreciate the call. Thank you for that. Wish I had more of an answer for you. Let's go to Roy in Richmond, Virginia. Roy, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, you still got the best show on there, my brother.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I wanted to say that this is the reason why we need to get these people out of power who sympathize with our enemies. They put political correctness ahead of American security. And if President Obama were Pinocchio, his nose would be 5 miles long by now and still growing.
Yeah.
And he would not get away with half of what he gets away if this so-called mainstream media had not become part of the cover-up. And even when they tell a little bit of the truth, have you ever noticed they always follow it up with, but a few Republicans think we should just get over it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Roy, talking about, CNN actually did some journalism. CNN was the one that broke the story about there being 35 CIA agents on the ground the night the attack went down in Benghazi. CNN was the one that surfaced. I mean, we talked about it from the very beginning, but it's the first time I've seen anybody in the mainstream media even touch on the possibility, I think the likelihood that they were running guns out of that compound to the Syrian rebels, and Ambassador Stevens was supervising this gun running operation to get the weapons they'd taken from Gaddafi and get them in the hands of Syrian rebels. Well, CNN actually broke that story. Then we have all these embassy closures. And as I suggested yesterday, there's a possibility this is purely political, the Obama administration trying to divert attention from the Benghazi scandal. But at the press briefing on Monday, even though CNN had broke this explosive story, and Trey Gowdy's out there saying their names are being changed, they're being dispersed throughout the country so nobody can find them. That's a huge story. And not even CNN that broke the story, they wouldn't even ask Jay Carney about it at the press briefing on Monday. And some of the stuff I read indicates that the journalists at CNN, they're afraid to cross the Obama administration because in the mainstream media, access is everything. And they're afraid that they're going to get cut off from access to the White House, and other mainstream media outlets are going to get stories and scoops and interviews that they're not going to get. So you're exactly right, Roy. The media has been complicit with the Obama administration. The first time one of them steps out of rank, like CNN, actually does some genuine journalism, Jake Tapper doing that, and he can be a decent journalist when he has a mind to it, they get sort of threatened or intimidated into pulling in their horns. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, we're not just up against President Obama, but we're up against his ministers of propaganda in the mainstream media. All right, Roy, listen, I appreciate the call. Thank you for the kind words, and it's great to hear from you again. So, that's what's going on over there, and you might have heard that the Obama administration has actually filed criminal charges in connection with this Benghazi attack. They have filed charges against prominent Libyan militia figures, including Ahmed Abu Khattala, who they think may be the mastermind of this assault. But two things. The Obama administration leaking this because the counts are under seal. They're under seal at a court in New York, so somebody in the Obama administration leaked this. They wanted the media to get wind of the fact that charges have been filed. Two things. Nobody has been arrested. Charges being filed don't mean anything until you have a suspect in custody. Nobody's in custody. Nobody's been apprehended. Nobody has even been questioned in this deal. Charges filed, meaningless.